Peter the Great, 26,000 tons of steel, 250 meters in length, a nuclear reactor, 20 anti-ship missiles on board. This ship took 12 years to build, and in that time, the country that ordered it ceased to exist. The heavy, nuclear-powered missile cruiser Peter the Great was laid down at the Baltic shipyard in Leningrad in 1986. Under the Soviet plan, it was to become the flagship of the Northern Fleet, the most powerful surface warship in the world, aside from aircraft carriers. Project Orlan was conceived as a response to American carrier strike groups. A single cruiser of this class carried more weaponry than an entire squadron of Western frigates. But in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. Funding stopped. The hull sat on the slipway, unfinished. In February 1993, the Russian government announced that the ship would be completed after all, and work resumed, though money remained critically short. On the 18th of April, 1998, Peter the Great was finally commissioned, 12 years after being laid down. By that point, 3 of her sister ships were already tied up at the pier with their reactors shut down, 1 following an accident, 2 for lack of maintenance funds. The 4th, the last operational cruiser of the class, became the flagship of the Northern Fleet. Peter the Great's full displacement of around 26,000 tons is roughly equal to that of the battlecruisers of the First World War era. No other surface warship in the world, aside from aircraft carriers, has reached this size. Hood, 45,000 tons. For 20 years, this ship was the largest warship in the world. She sank in 3 minutes. The battlecruiser Hood was launched in 1918 and commissioned in May 1920. For 2 decades, she remained the largest and most famous warship in the Royal Navy, a symbol of British imperial sea power. Her length was 262 meters. Her main armament, 8 guns in 4 turrets. The British press called her the Mighty Hood. But by 1941, the cruiser was obsolete. Her armor, particularly the deck plating, was inadequate for the threats of modern warfare. A planned refit had never been carried out. The ship was too badly needed in service. On the 24th of May, 1941, Hood intercepted the German battleship Bismarck in the Denmark Strait between Greenland and Iceland. During the engagement, a Bismarck shell penetrated Hood's deck and reached the aft magazine. The detonation of the ammunition tore the cruiser in 2. She sank in 3 minutes. Of a crew of 1,418, 3 survived. The Royal Navy lost its principal symbol in a matter of minutes, and immediately threw virtually the entire home fleet into pursuit of the Bismarck. The ship that had embodied British naval supremacy for 20 years proved vulnerable at precisely the point where it was least expected. Vanguard, the largest battleship ever built for the Royal Navy, the fastest, the only one of her class. She never fired a shot at an enemy. Vanguard was laid down in October 1941 at John Brown's shipyard in Clydebank. The Royal Navy was in urgent need of new heavy ships, following the loss of the battleship Prince of Wales and the battlecruiser Repulse in 1941. Designers mounted 381mm main guns, removed from older vessels, in a new, fast, and well-protected hull. The Admiralty calculated that Vanguard might still be in time to take part in the war against Japan, should it drag on into 1946. But construction was delayed by labor shortages and repeated redesigns. On the 30th of November 1944, the ship was launched. The war ended before she was complete. On the 12th of May 1946, Vanguard was commissioned, after the surrender of both Germany and Japan. The ship's full displacement was 51,000 tons. During sea trials, she made 31.5 knots, a record for British battleships. But there was nowhere to use any of it. In 1947, Vanguard carried the royal family to South Africa. In 1955, she was placed in reserve. In 1960, shortly before being struck from the Navy list, the ship appeared in the film Sink the Bismarck. standing in for the interior bridge and turret spaces of those very battleships that Vanguard had never met in action. In 1962, she was broken up. No British battleship has been built since. Bismarck, 52,000 tons, 8 main battery guns, 1 combat deployment. She sank the largest ship in the Royal Navy and was herself destroyed 3 days later. The German battleship Bismarck was commissioned on the 24th of August, 1940. She became the largest warship ever built in Europe and the German Navy's chief hope for dominance in the Atlantic. Bismarck was officially listed at 35,000 tons displacement to formally comply with international treaties. Her actual full load displacement exceeded 52,000 tons. In May 1941, Bismarck sortied on her first and only combat deployment, Operation Rheinübung. The mission? Break into the Atlantic and destroy Allied convoys running between North America and Great Britain. On the 24th of May 1941, she encountered the British battlecruiser Hood and battleship Prince of Wales in the Denmark Strait. A Bismarck shell struck Hood's magazine. Hood exploded and sank in 3 minutes. Of her crew of 1,418, 3 survived. But Bismarck herself had also been hit, with damage to her fuel tanks. The operation had to be abandoned. The ship turned for occupied France for repairs. News of Hood's loss galvanized the entire Royal Navy. Dozens of ships gave chase. On the 26th of May, Swordfish biplane torpedo bombers from the carrier Ark Royal damaged Bismarck's steering. She lost steering control. On the 27th of May, 1941, the British battleships Rodney and King George V spent an hour and a half shooting her to pieces at point-blank range. Of her crew of 2,300, 110 survived. Bismarck's entire combat career lasted 8 days. In that time, she sank 1 ship and was destroyed. 57,500 tons, 9 main battery guns, 16-inch, 4 wars, 50 years of service. Iowa. The Iowa-class battleships, 4 ships, Iowa, New Jersey, Missouri, and Wisconsin, were built in the United States in 1943 and 44. They became the last battleships commissioned by the U.S. Navy and the fastest heavy warships in the world. Maximum speed, 33 knots, which allowed them to operate with carrier strike groups. Each was 270 meters long. In September 1945, the Japanese surrender that ended the Second World War was signed aboard Missouri in Tokyo Bay. After the war, the ships were placed in reserve, but not for long. In 1950, they were returned to service for the Korean War, where their naval gunfire supported ground operations from the sea. In 1968, New Jersey put to sea again, this time off the coast of Vietnam, shelling enemy positions. In the 80s, in response to the appearance of Soviet Orlan-class missile cruisers, all 4 battleships were recommissioned and modernized. Tomahawk cruise missiles and Harpoon anti-ship missiles were fitted. In 1991, Missouri and Wisconsin took part in the Gulf War, firing 28 and 24 Tomahawks respectively against Iraqi targets and expending over 1,000 main battery rounds between them. American battleships opened fire for the last time in February 1991. After that, all 4 ships were permanently decommissioned and became museum ships. No other class of warship in history fought in 4 wars across 5 decades. 72,800 tons. 9 guns firing shells weighing 1.5 tons to a range of 42 kilometers. She barely fought at all, and was sunk in her first major engagement. Musashi. The battleship Musashi was laid down at Nagasaki on the 29th of March 1938 and commissioned on the 5th of August 1942. Together with her sister ship Yamato, she was one of the 2 largest and most heavily armed battleships in history. The Japanese Navy kept these ships as its main trump card for a decisive engagement with the American fleet. Because of the threat from submarines and enemy aircraft, Musashi spent most of the war at anchor at Truk, Brunei, and Kure. In March 1944, Musashi took a torpedo hit from an American submarine and was sent for repairs. In June 1944, she took part in the Battle of the Philippine Sea but did not engage. On the 24th of October 1944, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, Musashi became the primary target of American carrier aviation. 259 aircraft from 6 carriers attacked her in 6 waves. The battleship was hit by 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs. She sank at 7 in the evening of the same day. Of her crew of 2,399, 1,023 were lost. The most heavily armed battleship, kept in reserve for 2 years, was destroyed in her first major engagement, 2 years after commissioning. Yamato. The battleship Yamato was laid down at Kure on the 4th of November 1937 and commissioned on the 16th of December 1941, 1 week after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Her main battery, 9 guns of 460 millimeters, had no equal among any warship ever built. Each shell weighed 1,460 kilograms and flew 42 kilometers. Yamato was conceived as a ship capable of defeating several American battleships single-handedly. Instead, she spent most of the war at base. In October 1944, she took part in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, where she used her main battery against surface targets for the first and only time in the entire war. By April 1945, Japanese command, having lost its aviation and most of its fleet, devised the plan for Operation Ten-Go. Yamato was to sail to Okinawa as a kamikaze ship, beach herself, and fire on American landing forces until destroyed. She was given only enough fuel for the outward passage. On the 7th of April, 1945, in the East China Sea, American aircraft found her. 386 aircraft from 15 carriers attacked Yamato without any Japanese fighter cover. The battleship took at least 10 torpedo hits and 7 bomb hits, and at 2:23 in the afternoon, she capsized. The explosion of her magazine was visible 200 kilometers away. Of her crew of 3,332, 269 survived. Shinano. Shinano was laid down at Yokosuka in May 1940 as the 3rd Yamato-class battleship. After the catastrophic loss of Japanese carrier aviation at Midway in 1942, the unfinished hull was converted to an aircraft carrier. Conversion proceeded slowly. When, in 1944, it became clear that American aircraft were systematically bombing Japanese shipyards, the command ordered the unfinished ship moved away from Tokyo Bay to Kure. On the 19th of November, 1944, Shinano was officially commissioned. The ship was not complete. Her watertight bulkheads were not finished. Some boilers were not working. The fire suppression system had not been tested, and nearly 3/4 of her crew had no experience serving aboard a warship. On the 28th of November, 1944, Shinano put to sea. At 8:48 in the evening, she was found by the American submarine Archerfish, on patrol at the mouth of Tokyo Bay. After a 6-hour chase, Archerfish fired 6 torpedoes. 4 found their mark. Water poured through the unsealed bulkheads and cable runs. The inexperienced crew could not control the flooding. Shinano capsized 7 hours later. Of the 2,400 people on board, 1,435 were lost. American naval officers initially disbelieved the report of a ship of that size being sunk. They had no intelligence on Shinano's existence. Archerfish's commander was credited with sinking a carrier of only 28,000 tons displacement. The true scale of the loss only emerged after Japan's surrender. Shinano remains the largest ship ever sunk by a submarine. Nimitz, 100,000 tons, 33 meters above the waterline, 90 aircraft on board, a nuclear reactor that needs no refueling for 20 years. The Nimitz-class carriers, 10 ships, built in the United States between 1968 and 2006, and commissioned between 1975 and 2009. The lead ship, Nimitz, was commissioned on the 3rd of May, 1975, and named after Admiral Chester Nimitz, who commanded the Pacific Fleet during the Second World War. Each ship of the class is a floating airfield, 333 meters long, with a deck that would accommodate 3 football fields. 2 nuclear reactors give the ships virtually unlimited range. The nuclear fuel does not require replacement for more than 25 years. Each carrier's strike air wing comprises up to 90 aircraft, fighters, electronic warfare aircraft, airborne early warning aircraft, and helicopters. A single Nimitz-class carrier carries more air power than the entire air forces of most nations in the world. Ships of the class have taken part in every major U.S. military operation since 1975, from the Persian Gulf to Afghanistan and Libya. Today, most of the Nimitz-class carriers continue in service, with a projected operational life of 50 years. Gerald R. Ford. 100,000 tons, 337 meters in length, $13 billion, the most expensive warship in human history, and commissioned 2.5 years late, $1.5 billion over budget. The carrier Gerald R. Ford was laid down on the 14th of November 2009, launched on the 9th of November 2013, and officially commissioned on the 22nd of July 2017. She became the first fundamentally new American carrier design in 40 years, after the Nimitz-class had dominated the oceans since 1975. The ship is named after the 38th President of the United States, Gerald Ford, who served in the Navy during the Second World War. The carrier is fitted with an entirely new aircraft launch system, an electromagnetic catapult replacing the steam-powered system in use since the 1950s. 2 new type reactors generate 25% more electrical power than the reactors of the Nimitz class. The crew is reduced by around 1,000 people compared to her predecessors, while the number of sorties is increased. But the new systems proved extremely unreliable. The electromagnetic catapults and the new arresting gear failed repeatedly. The ship entered service in 2017, but remained only partially operational for several more years. The final cost exceeded $13 billion. By comparison, the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima in 1945 cost approximately $2 billion in today's money. The Gerald R. Ford cost 6.5 times as much. She is the largest warship ever built in human history. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel or suggest the next topic in the comments.